The Sherman tank. Why Soviet tankers loved America's World War II workhorse. Picture this. It's 1942, and World War II is raging. On the Eastern Front, Soviet forces are locked in brutal combat with Nazi Germany. Amid the chaos, a new player arrives on the scene, straight from the factories of Detroit, the American M4A2 Sherman tank, delivered through the Lend-Lease program. At first, Soviet tankers weren't sure what to make of it. Its tall profile, English labels, and unfamiliar design raised eyebrows. But as soon as they took it into battle, the Sherman earned their respect, and even their admiration. Why did this American tank become a favorite among Soviet crews? Let's dive into this incredible story, filled with action, ingenuity, and a touch of cross-cultural camaraderie. In this deep dive, we'll explore how the Sherman made its way to the Soviet Union, why it stood out compared to the iconic T-34, and what made it a game-changer on the battlefield. We'll weave in personal stories from tankers, economic insights into the Lend-Lease program, and a modern perspective on this legendary machine. Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride through history. Lend-Lease, America's lifeline to the Soviet Union. The big picture, how Lend-Lease fueled the war. To understand the Sherman's journey, we need to talk about Lend-Lease. In 1941, the United States launched this massive program to supply its allies with everything from tanks to canned goods. For the Soviet Union, reeling from Germany's lightning-fast invasion, Lend-Lease was a game-changer. Historical records show that the U.S. sent about 17.5 million tons of supplies to the Soviets, worth over $11 billion at the time, roughly $150 billion in 2025 dollars. Tanks, planes, trucks, and even Spam helped keep the Red Army fighting. The M4A2 Sherman, a diesel-powered version of America's most famous tank, started arriving in the Soviet Union in late 1942. Over the course of the war, the U.S. delivered around 4,100 of these tanks, equipped with a twin General Motors 6046 diesel engine pumping out 410 horsepower. Why diesel? The Soviets preferred it as their own T-34 tanks used diesel engines, which were less likely to catch fire when hit. Unlike the gasoline-powered M4A3S used by American forces, the M4A2 was tailored for Soviet needs. The tanks arrived via 3 perilous routes: the Arctic route through Murmansk and Arkhangelsk, dodging German U-boats in icy waters; the Persian corridor through Iran, where supplies were transferred to trains; the Pacific route through the Soviet Far East, a longer but safer path. Each shipment came with repair kits, tools, manuals, and spare parts, though wartime chaos meant some supplies arrived damaged or incomplete. Still, the Sherman quickly proved its worth on the front lines. First impressions. From skepticism to surprise. When Soviet tankers first laid eyes on the Sherman, they weren't exactly thrilled. At nearly 9 feet tall, it towered over the T-34's sleek 8-foot profile, making it a bigger target in the open steppes. The English labels on the controls were confusing, and the interior layout felt alien. But once they took it for a spin, their doubts melted away. The Sherman was reliable, easy to handle, and, believe it or not, comfortable. As one Soviet tanker, Ivan Korzunov, put it, climbing into a Sherman was like stepping into a Cadillac after riding a tractor. It just felt right. Why the Sherman won over Soviet tankers? Comfort, a tanker's dream. For Soviet tankers used to the cramped, no-frills T-34, the Sherman was a revelation. The T-34's crew compartment was so tight that the driver had to hunch over the controls, and the gunner and commander could barely move in the turret. The Sherman, designed with taller American soldiers in mind, offered a spacious interior. Think cushioned seats, decent ventilation, insulation for cold winters, and even storage space for personal gear. It was like the difference between a budget motel and a cozy cabin. The controls were another win. The Sherman's levers moved smoothly, the gearbox shifted cleanly, and the diesel engine started reliably, even in freezing Russian winters. Compared to the T-34, which sometimes needed a fire lit under it to warm the engine. The Sherman was a breeze to operate. Small details made a big difference. Interior lighting for working at night. Multi-angle periscopes for better visibility. The SCR-508 radio, which provided clear communication over miles, unlike the T-34's finicky radios. Exhaust filtration to reduce fumes inside the tank. These features weren't just nice-to-haves. They kept crews alert and effective during long missions. For tankers spending hours or even days inside their machines, the Sherman felt like a home away from home. Firepower and armor, ready for battle. The Sherman wasn't just about comfort. It packed a punch. Its frontal armor was 2.5 inches thick, about 63 millimeters, with the turret reaching up to 3 inches, 76 millimeters. The sloped armor plates increased protection, though the T-34's cemented steel held up better against close-range hits. Still, the Sherman could take a beating in most combat scenarios. The tank's 75 millimeters M3 gun, found on early models, was effective against German PZ-3 and PZ-4 tanks. Later versions sported a 76 millimeters M1A1 gun, capable of piercing the sides of a Panther or even a Tiger with a well-placed shot. The electric turret traverse was a game-changer, letting gunners aim faster than the T-34's manual system. A basic stabilizer, though not perfect, helped keep the gun steady on the move. The ammo was stored in protected niches, reducing the risk of catastrophic explosions, a common issue with the T-34. Mobility, smooth but not perfect. The Sherman's vertical volute spring suspension, VVSS, gave it a smooth ride on roads and in urban combat, but its narrow tracks struggled in the muddy fields of Eastern Europe. The T-34, with its wide tracks and low profile, was a beast on rough terrain, while the Sherman often got stuck in mud or snow. One Soviet tanker, Alexei Petrov, recalled, "On a highway, the Sherman was a dream, but in a swamp, you'd better have a tow truck nearby." Still, the Sherman's suspension was durable, lasting longer than the T-34's if maintained properly. The catch? Maintenance required skilled mechanics and precise tools, which were hard to come by in Soviet field workshops. The Sherman versus the T-34, a tale of two tanks. The T-34 is a Soviet legend, a symbol of victory in World War II. But it had flaws, and in some ways the Sherman outshone it. Let's break it down. Armor. T-34, 1.8 inch, 45 millimeters. Sloped frontal armor, equivalent to about 3.5 inches. Its cemented steel was tough against close hits. Sherman, 2.5 inch frontal armor, up to 3 inches on the turret. Sloped plates helped, but the steel was less resistant to direct impacts. Verdict: the T-34 edged out in close combat, but the Sherman held its own overall. Firepower. T-34, 76 millimeters gun, later 85 millimeters. Powerful but slow to aim due to manual turret controls. Sherman, 75 millimeters or 76 millimeters gun, with electric turret traverse and a stabilizer. Verdict: the Sherman's faster aiming and better sights gave it an edge in combat. Crew comfort. T-34. Cramped, poor ventilation, unreliable radios. Sherman. Spacious, well-ventilated, with a reliable radio. Verdict: the Sherman was a tanker's paradise compared to the T-34. Mobility. T-34. Wide tracks and low profile made it a mudmaster. Sherman. Smooth on roads but struggled off-road. Verdict: the T-34 dominated rough terrain. Reliability. T-34. Easy to build and repair but prone to breakdowns. Sherman. Reliable if maintained, but needed skilled mechanics. Verdict: the Sherman was sturdier with proper care, but Soviet conditions made that tough. The Sherman earned nicknames like M4 or Yankee among Soviet crews. It shone in elite units where tankers were trained to maximize its strengths. Commanders often chose Shermans for their tanks, thanks to the roomy turret, reliable radio, and great visibility. The Sherman's flaws. No tank is perfect. The Sherman had its downsides. Its height made it a target in open fields, unlike the low-slung T-34. The VVSS suspension, while smooth, wasn't built for the muddy, snowy conditions of the Eastern Front. Repairs were tricky without the right tools or parts, and Soviet mechanics often struggled to keep up. Ammo was another headache. American shells weren't always available, and Soviet rounds didn't always fit. One mechanic, Sergei Ivanov, summed it up: "The Sherman's like a high-maintenance sports car. Treat it right and it's a champ. Neglect it, and you're stuck." Despite these challenges, the Sherman's reliability and firepower kept it in high regard. The economic impact of Lend-Lease. Lend-Lease wasn't just about tanks, it reshaped the war. Tanks made up about 12% of Lend-Lease supplies, but in 1943, Shermans accounted for up to 20% of some Soviet tank units. This freed up Soviet factories to focus on other weapons like artillery and planes. The U.S. economy also benefited, with companies like Chrysler and General Motors churning out tanks, creating jobs and boosting production. The logistics were mind-boggling. Arctic convoys faced U-boat attacks, with losses sometimes hitting 30%. Every Sherman that reached the front was a testament to the bravery of sailors and the ingenuity of Allied logistics. After the war, the Soviets repaid some Lend-Lease debts, though the program's real value was in keeping the Red Army fighting. Tales from the front, Shermans in action. Let's bring this to life with stories from the battlefield. In 1943, during the Battle of Kursk, Lieutenant Mikhail Sokolov Sherman took out 2 German PZ-IVs. "We popped out from behind a hill," he recalled. "The electric turret let us fire twice before the Germans could react." In another tale, Captain Grigory Lebedev used his Sherman's radio to coordinate a flanking maneuver on the Second Belarusian Front, outsmarting a German position. Not every story had a happy ending. In 1944, near Vitebsk, Sergeant Peter Kovalev's Sherman got stuck in a bog. As the crew tried to free it, German artillery struck, reminding everyone that even the best tank needed smart tactics. The modern take: why the Sherman still matters. Historians still debate the Sherman's legacy. Some argue the T-34 was more versatile, while others, like American historian Stephen Zaloga, point out that the Sherman was the Allies' most produced tank, with over 49,000 built. The T-34's 84,000 units came over a longer period. Today, tank enthusiasts on platforms like X praise the Sherman's reliability and crew-friendly design. One ex-user posted in 2024, "The Sherman's like a classic pickup, tough, practical, and built for the job." Sherman versus T-34, a clash of philosophies. The T-34 was built for mass production and harsh conditions, its simplicity allowing Soviet factories to churn out thousands even during evacuations. But that simplicity meant cramped quarters and frequent breakdowns. The Sherman, on the other hand, reflected American engineering: comfort, reliability, and precision for trained crews. It wasn't as rugged as the T-34, but it was a tanker's dream in the right hands. The M4A2 Sherman wasn't perfect, but it was a lifeline for Soviet tankers. Its comfort, firepower, and reliability made it a standout on the Eastern Front. From the fields of Kursk to the streets of Berlin, Shermans fought alongside T-34s, proving that American engineering could shine in the toughest conditions. Today, museum Shermans remind us of the courage, sacrifice, and ingenuity that won the war. Hey, tank fans! If this story fired you up, smash that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of the Sherman compared to the T-34? Got any family stories from World War II? Let's keep the conversation going and honor the heroes who drove these machines to victory. Subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next one.